On a warm, bright afternoon when sunlight spilled across Riverside Avenue like liquid gold, a small bakery carried the comforting scent of fresh bread, sweet pastries, and soft memories waiting to be made. But amid all that warmth, a quiet storm stood at the door. Marissa, a thin and exhausted woman, stepped inside with dirt smudged across her clothes and worry carved into every line of her face. At her side stood her little daughter, Flora, whose wide, weary eyes still managed to hold a spark of hope. Marissa hadn't eaten since the day before. Flora's last meal had been nothing more than an apple split pitifully between them. They weren't there to buy anything. Marissa had only come to beg for something other people threw away, without a second thought. Even gathering the courage to walk through the door took everything she had left. Inside, the bakery felt painfully luxurious. Neatly stacked loaves, pastries glazed like jewels, and cakes decorated like they belonged at royal celebrations lined the shelves. Marissa lowered her gaze to keep from staring too long at the displays. Sometimes beauty hurt more than hunger. Flora clung to her sleeve, her small fingers trembling as if afraid the floor itself might tell them they didn't belong. With hesitant steps, Marissa approached the counter. The employees looked up, their polite smiles faltering as they took in her appearance. Her voice shook as she asked whether they had any expired cake or leftover pastries they planned to throw out. Something, anything, she could give her daughter, who hadn't had a treat in months. The workers exchanged uncertain glances. Their hearts clearly wanted to help, but their boss had strict rules about giving away food before closing. Marissa felt the silence press in like invisible walls. The shame stung. She considered leaving, pretending she hadn't said anything. But hunger welded her in place. Hunger made people whisper prayers they never thought they'd say out loud. Flora's eyes drifted toward a small strawberry-topped cake behind the glass. She didn't ask for it. Children like her learned early which dreams were allowed and which ones weren't. What Marissa didn't know was that someone else in the bakery had been watching. Roland Vance, one of the city's wealthiest entrepreneurs, stood a few feet away in a simple gray suit. He had come for a slice of blueberry pie and a moment of quiet. Wealthy though he was, grief had hollowed him years ago. He had buried his wife and daughter after a tragic accident, and since then had wandered through life with a heart sealed off behind walls no amount of money could break. Yet here, in the gentle light of a quiet bakery, a weary mother's trembling voice cracked something open inside him. He watched the scene unfold. The child hiding behind her mother, the mother standing tall despite the humiliation pressing down on her, the staff trapped between compassion and workplace rules. Roland did not see a homeless woman or a starving child. He saw suffering he recognized, the same hollow ache that once lived in his own home. While the workers hesitated, Roland stepped forward. Without drawing attention to himself or announcing his name, he quietly ordered the freshest cake in the display, a large vanilla sponge layered with berries and cream. Then he added 2 warm meals, pastries, sandwiches, and anything else he thought might restore life to a hungry pair of eyes. Marissa watched him in confusion, unsure why a stranger was ordering so much food. When he turned toward her, she braced herself for a lecture or a judgment. Instead, he simply asked the cashier to hand everything to her. No flourish. No dramatic reveal, just an act of kindness offered with the gentleness of daylight through a window. The workers softened instantly, ashamed of their earlier hesitation. When the bag of food was placed in Marissa's trembling hands, her eyes filled with tears she had held back for far too long. Flora's face lit up with quiet relief. Roland stepped toward the door, without waiting for gratitude. But Marissa called out to him with a soft, cracked whisper of thanks, a kind of sincerity he had never heard in the world of boardrooms and business deals. He turned, offered her a warm, human smile, something that felt foreign to him for years, and told her simply to take care. Then he stepped out into the sunlight, which suddenly seemed kinder. As Roland stepped outside, the wind felt gentler, the world quieter. Something inside him, something he believed had died with his family, stirred. Healing didn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it came in the form of a small girl's smile or a mother's trembling thank you. He realized he had lived for years as if compassion were a luxury he could no longer afford. Yet that afternoon, giving kindness had cost him nothing and returned something priceless, a sense of humanity he thought he had lost. Marissa and Flora found a small bench outside the bakery. There, beneath the afternoon sunlight, they opened a bag together. Flora's fingers hovered over the cake, as though afraid it might vanish if she touched it. When she finally took a bite, her face brightened with a joy so pure it softened even the ache in Marissa's chest. A simple slice of cake became a moment of dignity restored, a reminder that they were still worthy of kindness and warmth. For the first time in months, Marissa allowed herself to breathe, truly breathe. She hadn't expected salvation. She hadn't expected anything. She had walked into the bakery prepared to be ignored, rejected, or turned away, all things life had taught her to expect. Instead, she had been seen. Not judged, not shamed. Seen. The bakery staff peeked out the window, watching the small family share their food. Their earlier hesitation hung heavy on them. But witnessing Roland's quiet act changed something in them, too. They realized how easily one person's courage to be kind could transform an entire room. Roland walked slowly down Riverside Avenue, carrying a small paper bag with his blueberry pie, untouched. He didn't feel the hunger for it anymore. What he felt was something deeper, something he hadn't felt in years. Connection. And beneath that connection, hope. He knew that he could return to his life of meetings, investments, and silent nights. But something had shifted forever. One moment of compassion had been enough to chip away at the walls he had built around his heart. It didn't erase his loss, but it softened the edges. It reminded him that life, even after tragedy, still offered chances to be part of someone else's light. Marissa brushed crumbs from Flora's face as they ate slowly, savoring every bite. For the first time in a long while, Flora laughed, a soft, delicate sound like a bell in the quiet afternoon. Marissa closed her eyes for a moment, letting that sound heal parts of her she didn't know were wounds. When Flora looked up and asked, "Mama, is the world always as kind?" Marissa swallowed the lump in her throat. She didn't know how to answer. She had seen cruelty, coldness, and indifference. But today, in the form of a stranger in a gray suit, she had seen hope too. She finally whispered, "Sometimes it is, and sometimes people remind it to be." They finished their meal together, not rushing, letting warmth settle into their bones. The sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the world in soft honey-colored light, as if the day itself understood the importance of lingering. Roland reached the corner of the avenue and paused. He turned back for one last glance, not because he wanted thanks, but because he needed to know they were safe, fed, and smiling. When he saw them laughing together on the bench, something inside him eased. He allowed himself a small, private smile before continuing down the street. It wasn't millions of dollars. It wasn't a charity gala or a grand gesture. It was one moment of genuine human compassion. One moment offered at exactly the right time. And sometimes that's all it takes to change a day, a memory, or even a life. As the warm afternoon slowly folded into evening, a simple question about an expired cake became the start of something far greater. Hope for a hungry child, dignity for a struggling mother, and a spark of healing for a grieving man. And if you believe that kindness like this still matters, if you believe small acts can ripple outward in ways we may never fully understand, then let this moment live on. Let it remind you that humanity shines brightest in places where no one expects it.